You woke in the dark, 4:30 in the morning, every morning, 6 days a week, 52 weeks a year. No alarm clock. Your body knew. It had been doing this so long, it woke itself, already tired from yesterday, already dreading the next 14 hours. You dressed in the cold, no heat in the room. You could see your breath. Your hands ached before you even started working. That was arthritis. You were 34 years old. The walk to the factory was 2 miles. You left the house at 5. The streets were full of other men walking the same direction, shoulders hunched, lunch pails rattling. Nobody talked much at that hour. There was nothing to say. You had done this yesterday. You would do it tomorrow. You would do it until your body gave out or the factory did not need you anymore, whichever came first. Modern workers argue about hybrid schedules and remote Fridays. You argued about whether the foreman would let you sit down for 8 minutes to eat the lunch your wife packed at 4 in the morning. That was the negotiation. That was the fight. The factory whistle blew at 6. If you were not inside when it blew, you did not work that day. No pay, no explanation needed. There were 20 men outside the gate every morning, hoping someone did not show up. If you were late, one of them took your place. You were never late. Nobody was. Being late meant your family did not eat. You clocked in by walking past the foreman. He knew your face. There was no time card, no record, no proof you had been there. If the company later said you had not worked that day, you had no way to prove otherwise. But that did not happen often. They needed you. For now. The noise hit you the second you walked onto the floor. Not loud, deafening, a sound so constant and violent it stopped being a sound and became a physical thing pressing into your skull. Hundreds of machines running at once, metal on metal, gears grinding, leather belts slapping, steam hissing, men shouting over it, just to communicate the simplest instruction. Turn that. Move this. Watch out. You could not hear yourself think. After the first hour you stopped trying. Your mind went somewhere else, somewhere quiet, somewhere far away from the machine in front of you. That was dangerous. Men lost fingers when their minds wandered. But you could not stay present for 14 hours in that noise. Nobody could. So you went away inside your head and trusted your hands to keep working. The heat depended on the season. In summer, the factory was 110 degrees by 9 in the morning. No ventilation, no fans. The windows did not open. You sweated through your shirt in the first hour. By noon, your clothes were soaked and stuck to your skin. The air was so thick with metal dust and cotton fibers, you could see it hanging in the light from the windows. You breathed it in all day. It coated your lungs. You coughed it up at night. Black mucus. That was normal. In winter, the factory was freezing, until the machines warmed it. You worked in your coat for the first 2 hours. Your fingers were stiff. That made the work harder. Dangerous. A stiff finger does not move fast enough when the machine does something you did not expect. You learned to blow on your hands between motions. It did not help much. Your station was a drill press. The same motion 4,000 times a day. Pick up the piece, position it, pull the lever, the drill drops, the drill rises, move the piece, pick up the next one. You did this so many times your body learned to do it without your brain. Muscle memory. That was useful, and it was also how men got hurt. The machine did not care if you were paying attention. The machine did not stop. There were no guards on the drill, no safety mechanisms. If your hand slipped under the bit while it was dropping, the bit went through your hand and into the table below. The machine kept running. You pulled your hand out yourself. You walked to the foreman holding it, blood dripping on the floor. The foreman looked at it, decided if you could keep working, and sent you back or sent you home. If he sent you home, you did not get paid for that day. You also did not get paid for however many days it took to heal. There was no such thing as workers' compensation, not until 1911, and even then only in some states. If you got hurt, that was your problem. The company did not pay your medical bills. The company did not hold your job. If you were gone too long, someone else was doing your work when you came back. You learned to work hurt, a smashed finger, a gash that needed stitches, a pulled muscle in your back that made every movement feel like tearing. You worked through it because not working meant not eating. The pace never slowed. The foreman walked the floor with a watch. He knew how long each operation should take. If you were slow, he told you. If you were still slow an hour later, he told you to go home, permanently. There was always someone, faster, someone younger, someone more desperate. Speed was everything. Safety was nothing. You were not allowed to sit, not during your shift. Sitting was for people who did not need the job badly enough. You stood for 14 hours. Your feet swelled, your knees ached, your lower back seized up by the afternoon, and you learned to push through it because there was no choice. The work did not stop. The machine did not stop. You did not stop. Lunch was 30 minutes, not a lunch break. 30 minutes where the machines kept running, but you were allowed to step away and eat. You ate standing up next to your station, fast. The food was cold. Your wife had packed it 12 hours ago, bread and lard, sometimes cheese. An apple if the season was right. You ate it in 8 minutes and spent the other 22 minutes standing there, staring at nothing, trying to convince your body it was resting. Some men sat on the floor during lunch. The foreman did not like it, but he allowed it. Sitting on the factory floor with your back against the wall, eating bread, surrounded by machines that never stopped making noise. That was your rest. That was the break. There was no afternoon break, no coffee break, no moment to step outside and breathe air that did not taste like metal. You worked straight through from lunch until the 6 o'clock whistle. 8 more hours. The same motion, over and over. Your hands moved without you. Your mind floated. Time stopped meaning anything. The only time that mattered was 6 o'clock. The whistle blew. You stopped. You did not finish what you were doing. You stopped mid-motion because the whistle meant the day was over, and if you kept working for free, the company would let you. You walked out. You clocked out by walking past the foreman. He nodded. You left. The walk home was the same 2 miles. Your feet hurt worse now. Your back hurt worse. Your hands were cramping. You walked slower than you had that morning. Everybody did. The streets were full of men walking home, too tired to talk, too tired to do anything but put one foot in front of the other until they reached their door. You got home at 7. Your wife had dinner waiting. You ate. You did not talk much. There was nothing to say. She asked if the day was hard. You said it was fine. It was always fine. What else could you say? She knew what the work was. Everybody knew. Complaining did not change it. After dinner you sat. 1 hour, maybe 2 if you were lucky. You did not read. You were too tired. You did not go out. You had no money and nowhere to go. You sat in the chair and stared at the wall and let your body stop moving for the first time in 14 hours. That was your evening. That was your life outside of work. You were in bed by 9. You needed to be. You had to wake at 4:30. Your body needed 7 hours of sleep to do this again tomorrow. It did not get 7 hours. It got 6.5. That was close enough. You learned to function on 6.5. Everybody did. Saturday was the same. 14 hours. Sunday you did not work. Sunday was church and sitting. That was rest. 1 day a week where you did not stand in front of a machine. 1 day where your hands did not move 4,000 times doing the same motion. You spent that day recovering just enough to survive the next 6. You made $12 a week, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, 84 hours total. $12. That was 14 cents an hour. A pound of flour cost 4 cents. A pound of butter cost 28 cents. A dozen eggs cost 18 cents. Rent for a tenement room was $4 a month. So your $12 bought 3 pounds of flour, 3 dozen eggs, some butter, some lard, maybe a chicken if you were lucky, and it covered rent with a little left over. A little, not much. A pair of work boots cost $2. Those boots lasted 6 months if you were careful. A winter coat cost $5. You did not buy a new coat. You wore the same coat until it fell apart, then you bought a used one for $1. A doctor visit cost $2. You did not go to the doctor unless you were dying. Even then, you hesitated. $2 was a sixth of your weekly pay. $2 was food for 4 days. If your child got sick, you made a choice. Pay the doctor or feed the family. Most men fed the family. Most children got better on their own. Some did not. That was the calculus. That was the world. There was no such thing as overtime pay. You worked 84 hours and you got paid for 84 hours at the same rate. If the company needed you on Sunday, you worked Sunday. They paid you the same 14 cents an hour. If you said no, someone else said yes. The company did not beg. The company did not negotiate. The company told you what the job was and you took it or you left. There was no paid vacation, no sick leave, no personal days. If you did not work, you did not get paid. If you were too sick to work, you stayed home and lost that day's pay. If you were sick for a week, you lost a week's pay. If you were sick for a month, you lost your job. There was no safety net, no unemployment insurance, no government assistance. You worked or you starved. Those were the options. The company owned you in ways that are hard to explain to people who have never lived it. You did not negotiate your hours. You did not negotiate your pay. You did not ask for time off. You showed up, you did what you were told, and you took what they gave you. If you complained, you were gone. If you tried to organize, you were gone and blacklisted. The Pinkertons made sure of that, and if this kind of history matters to you, that subscribe button makes sure you never miss one. Child labor was not unusual. It was expected. A family could not survive on one income. So the children worked. Your 10-year-old son worked in the same factory you did. Different floor, different job, same hours. He made $4 a week. That $4 was the difference between eating and not eating. So he worked. He should have been in school. There was no law saying he had to be, not nationally. Some states had laws, most did not. Even in states with laws, the laws were not enforced. The factory needed the labor. The family needed the money. The child worked. He did not complain. He knew what the family needed. He stood on a wooden box to reach his machine. His hands were small. That made some jobs easier. Threading bobbins, tying broken threads, reaching into tight spaces between moving parts. The work that was too delicate or too dangerous for adult hands. That was children's work. They were good at it. They were fast. Their fingers were nimble. That was worth $4 a week. The box he stood on was 2 feet high. He stood on it for 12 hours a day, sometimes 14 if the factory was behind on orders. His legs were thin, his back curved from bending over the machine. He was 10 years old and his body was already forming wrong. That would get worse. By the time he was 20, his spine would be permanently bent. He would walk with a stoop for the rest of his life. That was normal for children who worked the mills. He would work until he was 16, maybe 18 if his body held up. Then he would do what you did. 14-hour days, 6-day weeks, $12 a week. He would marry. He would have children. Those children would work in the same factory. That was the cycle. That was the future. Nobody expected anything different. Men died at work. Not sometimes. Regularly. A man on the 3rd floor got his arm caught in a belt drive. The belt pulled him in. He died there. The machine kept running. The foreman shut it down, pulled the body out, cleaned up the blood, and started the machine again. A new man was at that station by the afternoon. The dead man's family got nothing. No compensation, no pension, no apology. The company did not owe them anything. The man had known the risks. Everybody knew the risks. That was the job. His widow had 4 children. The oldest was 12. He went to work the next week. Same factory, same floor his father died on. The family needed the money. There was no life insurance, no death benefit, no help from anyone. The church took up a collection. It paid for the funeral. After that, the family was on its own. The widow took in laundry. She sewed. She cleaned houses when she could find the work. The children all worked. The 12-year-old made $5 a week. The 10-year-old made 4. The 8-year-old swept floors for 2. Together they almost made what their father had made. Almost. They got by. Barely. The average industrial worker in 1910 died at 47 years old. 47. Not from disease. From the work. From lungs filled with dust. From injuries that never healed right. From infections that started small and turned septic because nobody could afford a doctor. From bodies that were used up and worn out by 30 years of standing in front of machines that did not stop. If you made it to 50, you were lucky. If you made it to 60, you were rare. There was no retirement, no pension, no Social Security until 1935. You worked until you could not work anymore, and then you depended on your children to feed you. If you had children, if they were alive, if they had enough to share. Some men saved, a little bit every week, enough to bury themselves when the time came. That was the goal. Die with enough money in a jar to pay for a wooden box and a hole in the ground. Do not be a burden. That was dignity. That was all you could hope for. Women did not work in the factories as much, but they worked. They took in laundry, they sewed piecework at home, they cleaned houses, they did whatever brought in money because one income was never enough. Your wife woke at 4 to pack your lunch and start the laundry before the sun came up. She worked all day, while you were gone. She had dinner ready when you walked in. She worked harder than you did. She made nothing. The system was not designed to be fair. It was designed to be efficient. The factory needed labor. Labor was cheap. Men were replaceable. If you could not do the job, someone else could. If you got hurt, someone else took your place. If you died, someone else was there by afternoon. The system did not care about you. It cared about production. You were a tool. Tools wear out. You get new ones. There were no unions in most places. Trying to form one got you fired. Talking about forming one got you fired. Even listening to someone talk about forming one could get you fired. The Pinkertons watched. The foreman listened. If you were suspected of organizing, you were gone, and you were blacklisted. No other factory would hire you. You left town or you starved. Some men tried anyway. Some men believed it could be different. They organized in secret. They met in basements. They whispered. They planned. Sometimes they struck. Most of the time the strike was broken in days. The company brought in replacement workers. The Pinkertons brought in guns. The strikers went back to work, or they did not work at all. A few strikes succeeded. Most failed. The men who led them paid for it. The blacklist was real, and it was brutal. Your name went on a list that traveled between factories, between cities, sometimes between states. If you were on it, you could not get work. Not in your trade. Not anywhere the list reached. Men who organized in Pittsburgh found themselves unable to get hired in Cleveland. Men who struck in Chicago could not find work in Detroit. The companies talked to each other. They shared information. They protected each other from men who thought they deserved better. So you moved. You changed your name. You lied about where you had worked before. You hoped nobody recognized your face. Some men made it work. Some men started over in a new city and kept their heads down and survived. Others did not. They ran out of cities. They ran out of options. They took whatever work they could find, day labor, loading docks, anything that did not ask questions. The pay was worse. The conditions were worse. That was the price of speaking up. Blair Mountain was the exception. 1921. 10,000 coal miners in West Virginia took up arms against the coal companies and the government that protected them. They fought for 5 days. The United States Army was sent in to stop them. They dropped bombs, actual bombs, on American workers. The miners lost. Some were imprisoned. Some were killed. Most went back to the mines. Nothing changed. But something had shifted. The fight had happened. It had been seen. The violence the companies were willing to use had been exposed. It would take years, but the labor movement that came later was built on the bodies of the men who fought at Blair Mountain. They lost the battle. They started the war. The companies did not just fight with bullets. They fought with money. They bought newspapers. They bought politicians. They bought judges. When a law was proposed that would limit working hours or improve safety conditions, the companies made sure it did not pass. When a judge ruled in favor of a worker, the companies appealed until they found a judge who would rule the other way. The system was built to protect them. It was working exactly as designed. Corruption was not hidden. It was open. Everybody knew which politicians were owned by which companies. Everybody knew which judges could be bought. It was not a secret. It was how things worked. The companies had the money. Money bought influence. Influence became law. The law protected the companies. The circle was complete. Workers had nothing to leverage except their labor, and their labor was only valuable if they could organize enough of it to matter. One man refusing to work meant nothing. 100 men refusing to work meant something. 1,000 men meant the factory stopped. That was power. The only power workers had, and the companies knew it. That was why they fought so hard to prevent it. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire happened in 1911. 146 garment workers died. Most of them were young women. They died because the exit doors were locked. The owners had locked them to prevent workers from taking unauthorized breaks. When the fire started, the women could not get out. They burned. They jumped. They died. The owners were tried for manslaughter. They were acquitted. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. The civil suits that followed were settled for $75 per victim. $75. That was what a life was worth. The factory owners went on to open new factories. The doors were still locked. That fire changed nothing immediately, but it planted something, a seed of rage that would grow for decades. The images of women jumping from the 9th floor stayed in people's minds. The locked doors became a symbol, not right away, but eventually. The labor movement that came later pointed to Triangle. This is what happens when workers have no power. This is what companies do when nobody stops them. By 1938, the Fair Labor Standards Act set a maximum 40-hour work week and established overtime pay. It banned child labor under 16. It set a minimum wage of 25 cents an hour. These things that seem basic now were radical then. They were fought for. Men died for them. Before that law, there was nothing. No limit on hours. No extra pay for extra work. No protection for children. The company decided what was fair, and you accepted it or you left. That was the deal for 50 years. 2 generations of men lived and died under that system. The men who worked those 14-hour days built the factories that built the country. They poured the steel. They ran the machines. They loaded the rail cars. They made the goods that made America an industrial power. They did it for $12 a week. They did it until their bodies gave out. Most of them died with nothing. Their sons worked shorter hours. Their grandsons had unions. Their great-grandsons have weekends and overtime and the right to organize without being shot. That did not happen because companies decided to be generous. It happened because men fought for it, some of them with words, some of them with their lives. The work week you have now was built on the exhaustion of men who never saw it. The safety standards that protect you were written in the blood of men who had none. The retirement you might get to enjoy exists because men who never retired demanded it anyway. Stand in a factory today and it is quiet enough to have a conversation. The machines have guards. The shifts are 8 hours. There are break rooms. There is air conditioning. There are laws. Walk that same floor in 1910 and you would not last a day. Not because you are weak, because the work was inhuman. The men who did it were not stronger than you. They were not tougher. They just had no choice. And they did it anyway, every day, for decades, until it killed them. That was the deal. That was America.